Hey, everybody, we're here alive and thrive in Toronto, home of Blue Jays, Raptors, Maple Leafs, and Canadian psychic Robert Lindsy Milne. That's me. Welcome to my side of the crystal ball. We've got a great show for you tonight, a couple of really good guests, a good WWRS. But before I continue with that, I would just like to take this moment to wish all my Jewish brothers and sisters around the world a very, very happy Hanukkah. And tonight is the fourth night of Hanukkah. And when I think of Hanukkah, I think of happiness and laughter and dancing and food and family, and happy Hanukkah, everybody. So so I'd like to introduce our guests or talk about our guests. First one, of course, is WWRS. I'm going to be talking about trust, going to do that very, very shortly. Then on the experts chair tonight, Tinka Bel Boczek. Interesting name, fabulously interesting person, psychic, medium, channeler, spiritualist, witch, and many, many other things. And one thing that she is determined, dedicated, as well as very kind and loving. One other thing about Tinka is that she's very much like many of her contemporaries. Most of us have been through some types of physical trauma, abuse, and issues. She'll be talking about those, how she's healed from them, and her amazing life journey and healing. My very next guest after that in the experts chair is someone I've known also for a while, Sharmini Varunan. Sharmini is a really lovely person, very intelligent, poised, polished, educated. Sharmini is a nurse. Sharmini is a palliative care nurse. She's been a nurse now for 10 years. 5 of them is in palliative care. She is kind and loving, and that, I guess, that helps with that profession. She's going to be talking about what happens when we're dying. We often talk about when we die, and we talk about how we could die sometimes. But Sharmini is going to talk to us on how we die and what they do for us in that treatment. It's a very interesting, emotional, and very sensitive interview. Before we start this very sensitive and tender show tonight, I've got some requests. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere else you watch your podcasts. If you would like to find me personally, you can find me on first of all, my website, www.robertlindsymilne.com. You can find me on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and of course, YouTube. And now, without further ado, here comes WWRS. My WWRS tonight is about a very important factor in every single relationship we have. It's called trust. What is trust? How do you get it? How do you build it? Can you lose it? Can you get it back again? Well, trust is based on 4 elements. And those 4 elements are openness, acceptance, reliability, and congruence. Openness, acceptance, reliability, and congruence. And if all 4 of those factors are present in a relationship, then trust is being built. If one or more of those elements are missing from a relationship, then trust is breaking down and indeed even being destroyed. So now every relationship of these 4 elements are applicable. However, they're also relationship appropriate. And when I say openness, I have no secrets, you're going to have a different openness with your with your husband or your wife than you would have, say, with a boss. You would share everything that applies to your work with your boss, just as you would, but you wouldn't share with your boss what's the intimate parts of a relationship. So it's relationship appropriate. I have no secrets. And by the way, in a love relationship, in a marriage, there should be no secrets. Acceptance. Acceptance, who you are is okay by me. You don't have to change. You're just the way you are. That's acceptance. And when you're around somebody that accepts you, you just know that and you feel relaxed. You feel comfortable in that acceptance. Reliability. Following through on what you say you're going to do, or living a lifestyle that's consistent, paying your bills, telling the truth, being on time, following the rules, being consistent. That's reliable. And the fourth element in building trust is congruence. Walking the walk, talking the talk, meaning that you live the values you propose that you have. So congruence is following through on the values you say you have. I love women, someone could say, but yet in a moment of anger would be reduced to the C word. Or I love all races, but yet in a moment of stress or tension or anger, or even humor, by telling a racist joke. That would be incongruent. Congruence would be living up to what you profess you are. When all those factors are present, then the relationship, trust is being built. When one is missing, trust is being broken down and destroyed. And by the time you get to the zero mark in terms of your trust account, so much damage has been done in your relationship, you'll have to work really hard to get it back again. But it can be done. Just remember, openness, I have no secrets. Reliability, I follow through with my word. Acceptance, who you are is okay by me. And congruence, I walk my talk. I live up to my behavior, my morals, and my values. And when you do that, you're going to have very trusting, very happy, and very comfortable relationships. And that's my WWRS for tonight. What an interesting experience. We're going to be going all the way to Australia once again, probably my most favorite continent. And we're going to be talking to Tinka Bel Boczek. Tinka Bel Boczek is one of the most impressive, determined, and accomplished people that I've met in a really long time. And as a sidebar, she happens to be an intuitive medium, psychic, an empath, a witch, that's with a W, and she's agreed to talk with us about her skills and about her amazing survival skills. Tinka, it's a privilege and an honor to have you on my show. What a delight. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I have to ask you this question. We were just talking just before. I really believe in your abilities. There's no question about that. But you're a psychic medium, intuitive empath, energy channeler, witch, healer. I would also say that you've got the makings of a really good mentor. But what's the difference between being intuitive and being empathic?
Intuitive,
or is there?
Well, for me, intuitive, sometimes I just get that, I get a feeling. I get either visions from spirit, there might be words.
Did you say spirit?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes. Okay, yeah.
Sometimes it's just like that gut feeling that I have. Empathic is different. I feel other people's emotions. I can understand exactly what they're feeling in that situation. And until I learned how to distinguish what was my feelings and what was their feelings, I used to think a lot of that was my own. And once I was able to determine that it was other people's energies that I was reading and picking up on, that's when it was made a lot clearer for me, and I could distinguish between the two a bit more.
So the connection, your personal connection with that other individual is empathic. Your psychic or whatever is the intuitive. Is that correct? When you're led by spirit, and is that how you're seeing it?
Yeah, I think that's how I'm saying it.
No,
yeah, it's just
seeing it. Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes I'll be with someone and I won't necessarily pick up on them empathically because they've either got their shields up or they've got things up, but I'll get intuitive messages that come through, things that I know about that person that I wouldn't normally know because I've never met them before or never come across them before, but things that I know about them, how they are as a person, people surrounding them in their lives.
How did you learn how to do that? And when did you learn how to do that?
I think I've always had the gift, but I never really connected with it until probably 2016. I was at the end of my marriage and I was going through a really hard time. And for me, Facebook was my one way of connecting with people. So I was reading a lot, going on lots of Facebook pages. I was watching a show in Australia that was on called Psychic TV that was on 4 nights a week. And I would stay up late every night that it was on and tune in and watch all the readers doing their thing and connecting that way. And then I realized that as they were reading, that the people that they were reading for, I was picking up things and then they were actually saying the things that I was picking up on. So I was kind of getting a bit of a vibe for it then. However, it's probably not until maybe 2018, 2019.
So in retrospect, were you picking up those things that either not acknowledging them or unconsciously following them?
I don't think I was probably a bit of both because I wasn't thinking about being psychic or having psychic abilities or anything like that. I was getting like a gut feeling about something. And because I wasn't able to determine at that stage what was my own feelings or someone else's, I kind of didn't know if I was connecting or if I wasn't connecting. But probably in about 2018, 2019, that's when everything really kind of started like falling into place for me. I was really connecting with spirit a lot more and being able to recognize the signs.
I'm particularly interested in how did you contact or get in touch with spirit, as you say?
So initially I had a mentor called Makeda. She was one of the psychic mediums on PTV.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, and we connected and she is like a soul sister to me. I love her dearly. And she made me aware of things that I wasn't really aware that I was doing. I'm a huge writer. So if I can't express to someone how I'm feeling or if it's something that I just need to get off my chest so I'm not doing headlaps with myself, I write things down. So I did a lot of poetry writing, a little writing, getting things off my chest. And that's when she was telling me that, you know, my poetry is my spell work. That's me creating spells. It's me creating all these different energy and things like that. So once she told me that, I was a bit more aware of what I was doing and what I was putting into my words and the energy that I was placing into it. Did I want to put it into a negative space, or was I wanting to put that energy into a more positive space? Yeah, so I mean, I did do cards, like tarot cards and oracle cards initially, because I needed that tangible evidence as something for me to see, like to believe.
And then you rose above them?
Yeah, and then this year I still haven't got rid of them. I won't get rid of them, but I've put my oracle and tarot decks aside. And from about March this year, I've been purely going on my intuition, my psychic, and my mediumship. So it's been extremely strong.
How do you know the difference between spirit and Tinka Bel?
Okay, so
and Boczek, because there's two different vibes with those names.
Yeah. So like when I know it's me, like if I'm imagining something, it's from my left forehead. So I get like visions or thoughts from there. If I get messages from spirit, it's always in my right ear, and the messages or videos or whatever images that are playing all come from the right side and then go across. So once I was able to determine the difference between the two, it made the connection with spirit a lot easier.
So then you hear the words through your right ear, And through your left side, you have the feeling or the energy or the vibes. Is that what you're saying? Because that's fascinating. I love that.
Well, like, so for instance, like if I get a message from spirit, it'll be that within that 1, 2, 3 second kind of mark that comes through on the right side. All right. So I haven't had time to conjure up what could be possibly happening or think about what was happening. Okay. If I'm thinking too much about it, that's when I know that I'm not connecting with spirit and that's me. I'm just trying to drum something up, so to speak. All right. But from spirit, it's all through my right side, and it happens really quite quickly.
Okay. Well, that's really fascinating. So you're now at the point where you're the medium rather than use a medium to do your work. You're the medium.
Yes.
Has there been any differences in your throat in the last year or so? What?
Most definitely.
Has there?
I think I have a very good, clear throat chakra now. I used to bite my tongue a lot and not say what was on my mind because fear of upsetting other people. Yeah. And by doing that, it was making me ill. It was making me sick. I was, having a lot of self-doubt and things like that. I'm taking on energies that weren't mine. So the moment I started speaking my truth and being true to myself in every shape and form, everything just got so much clearer. Everything was so much better. There was improvement all across the boards in my life, in every shape and form.
What kind of things do you tell people or talk to people about when you're doing your readings, be that through spirit or through you? By the way, I think both come through you, but one is, like spirit brings it, but it's still coming through you.
Well, sometimes like it'll be a question that the sitter or the person that I'm reading for is asking, and that will incite a whole range of messages coming through. Mm-hmm. Sometimes I can just pick up on their energy and I will say to them straight up before we start, I'm picking up on this vibe, blah, blah, blah. Can you resonate with that? And that sort of gives me a vibe on and gives me a feeling on where exactly they're at and if I'm connecting quite well to them. Quite often I've had mediumship, and I've had those spirits standing there straight right in front of me, almost like a hologram of a person, being really, really clear.
Really? You see that? And you just started doing that like when you were 40 or 41? You had, not even as a kid though?
Not that I can remember. Like
really?
I feel like I have been connected, but I wasn't really aware. Like I've had lots of deja vu. Yeah. And things like that. And even now I have little flashbacks to certain parts of my life when I went, oh my God, I was actually connecting with spirit.
I see.
I think too, with people around me not believing in spirit or people around me not supporting the idea of, being able to talk to spirit, it just sort of gets pushed away and pushed aside, and then you sort of forget about it and don't do anything.
Besides being a working professional, well, I'm just going to say psychic because I call myself that. So as being a working professional, you had to fight to get there. It wasn't like you just sort of became a professional. You've been fighting over the past few years with some challenges.
I have,
Would you like to share? Maybe there's somebody out there that you could inspire. You certainly have inspired me.
So I was married. I'd been married since I was 23, and I left my husband when I was 37. We had 3 children together, and towards the end of my relationship, it was like there was a domestic violence involved. I was 45 kilos, and I looked like a skeleton. And I was at the stage where I was like, if I don't leave this relationship on my own being, I'm going to be leaving in a body bag.
Was getting that violence?
There was a lot of emotional, a lot of mental. Yes. There was a little bit of physical, but it was the emotional and mental that was just debilitating. And the controlling aspect that he had over me was just diabolical. Food for me was the only thing that I did have control over. So I could decide whether I wanted to eat or whether I didn't want to eat. So I became anorexic because that was as bad as it was. I had control over that. It was,
Yeah.
I decided what was going in my mouth, how often that food was going in my mouth and when. But that I didn't like the way I was feeling. I didn't like the way I was looking, and I needed to make a change. And I was like, you know what? What's worse? Two parents staying together and it creating this disturbing home life for our children, or having two parents that were separate and happy, and having our children raise up and be happy and, you know, and have some stability. So I chose the latter. I chose to leave, and unfortunately, I had to leave my children, and they are with my ex-husband and his mum. But I needed to do that for me. I truly did, and I needed to do that for them. And I hopped into another relationship pretty quickly after that, and I was in that relationship for 2.5 years. And through that relationship, she was really quite supportive, and we both had psychic abilities, and we were encouraging each other and building each other up and things like that. But there was also drug abuse in there as well. And there was some drug abuse too while I was with my ex-husband. I can happily say that I'm clean and sober, and I'm doing fantastically well, and I don't ever want to go back.
So with your ex-husband and ex-partner, what was the Popeye the Sailor Man moment for you? And I think I should tell everyone else what. So the Popeye the Sailor Man moment, if we think of the cartoon Popeye, in every episode, what happens is Bluto beats Popeye up, ties him up in chains, throws him in the ocean or something. And then he kidnaps Olive Oil, Sweet Pea, or Poop Deck Pappy, or any of the three, or all together. And then Popeye is at the bottom of the ocean, all in chains, and he says to himself, "That's all I can stand, because I can't stand no more." Pulls out a can of spinach, eats the spinach, breaks the chains, beats the hell out of Bluto, and saves Olive Oil, Sweet Pea, Sweet Pea, or Poop Deck Pappy, or any other combination. So what was the Popeye the Sailor Man moment for you?
Well, for me, like in my marriage, it was life or death for me, pretty much. It was just like, if I stayed, I knew that I wouldn't be staying around for very long. As I said, I was skeletal. I looked terrible. I felt terrible. I had no energy. Everything around me, I just felt was imploding. And I'd found out that my partner was on a dating website. And yes, that I kept that silent to myself for 8 weeks. And then when he accused me of cheating, I gave him all the evidence on my phone and went, no. And that was a turning point for me. So the moment that happened, I turned and I left, and I never went back. And it was a really hard moment, but it was like the best decision that I ever made. It truly, truly was, because I realized that I am worthy and I deserve so much better than this. And I deserve to give myself that happiness and not be reliant about someone else to make myself happy. With my ex-girlfriend, that breakup really took me by surprise. I did not see it coming, and I'm so grateful for that breakup. It was the breakup that I needed to have, because it was the breakup that pushed me into 5 or 6 weeks of shadow work, locking myself in my room and just doing me. And I came out of that amazingly well. And like, you know, people were just going into lockdown in 2020, and I'm going, oh my God, I've already been in lockdown. This is amazing. I still don't have to see people. I can still focus on myself. I can still do this. Like, to me, being isolated was a gift. It was a reward. Like, I was just thinking, this is amazing. And then a couple of months later, I became homeless. So I was couch surfing for 7 months. And again, that just changed my world, but it opened my eyes to so many more other possibilities out there. And, you know, learning different family lives and different family situations and how everyone gets along and their scenarios. And I am forever grateful for that. You know, it's been amazing. It really has been. And then, you know, to be almost in a place now for 11 months and, you know, and looking after myself, and I'm working again and things like that. It's just been a real, you know, 80 flip on how I used to be and where I was.
I know we connected sometime a while ago. So how did that this? Because I forget what happened. How did this happen?
We have a mutual friend, Asha Messenger.
Oh yes, she's been on the show too.
Yeah, and you had commented on, she just actually commented that she'd had a reading done from you, and I had written on on her post, I couldn't think of anyone more deserving. I'm getting teary thinking about this. And you replied to my comment. You didn't reply to anyone else's comment, but you replied to mine.
Really?
And yeah.
There must be something special about you.
There was, and you made me feel that too. And you've been my mentor ever since. And that was in January. And I'm extremely blessed to have you in my life. You have made me realize things about myself that I wasn't recognizing. And you believed in me when no one else believed in me. And I'm truly grateful.
So over the past 9-10 months, the work that you've done, the growth that you've made has just been skyrocketing. It's been awesome. I've never seen anybody work so hard, grow so much, and become so strong. You don't know this, but I have a very special club. There's not very many in the world. It's called the Courage Club. And the Courage Club is people that from all walks of life that reach down inside with all their strength when they're in trouble, with all their strength and all their courage, they come back. Yeah. And these very special people come into my Courage Club. And when you are in the club, you get your courage medal. And this will be yours. If we were in Canada, I would be pinning it on you, but I'm going to be mailing it to you. So this is your courage pin. And I would like to welcome you to the Courage Club.
Thank you.
And if people would like to get a reading from you or connect with you, how do they find you?
I have a Facebook page called Tinka's Spiritual Belly.
Oh, yes. And that's how we find you? Yeah.
Yep. I'm also on Facebook as Tinka Bel Boczek.
Yes.
So yes, you can find me. You can email me at tinkabelboczek@gmail.com, and we can go from there.
Thank you for being on. I'm so proud of you. You've come a long way, Pilgrim.
Thank you.
My guest tonight, Sharmini Varunan, registered nurse and a specialist in palliative care. And I have to admit that I know Sharmini and her family. And at times she and her family have consulted me. Tonight is the first time I'm going to get to the opportunity to hear what Sharmini has to say rather than what I have to say. Sharmini, welcome to my side of the crystal ball, and it's so great that you're here with me.
Thank you for having me, Robert. I'm very happy to be here and be on your show. Congratulations.
Great, thank you. So you are a palliative care nurse.
Correct.
What is that? What is a palliative care nurse? What do you do?
So I've done palliative care and as a bedside nurse. So I worked in a hospital where I took care of patients while they're at the end stage of their life. Wow. And now I'm working where I deal with patients and families over the phone and trying to help them virtually, especially after the pandemic, to help them through that phase and also support them in the community. So I'm doing it a little differently now.
Yeah, so you're not actually doing but you have done all the hands-on work, but now you're doing, what are you doing now in your role in palliative care?
So with the experience I've had working in bedside, which is the key, the base of palliative care, where the core of palliative care lives, I think. So I'm using that experience to help patients and families navigate through their palliative experience, especially post-pandemic. A lot of the families want to be home and be with their loved ones. So trying to support.
Pandemic, where more people would die, complete their life or pass on in the hospital or in a more professional setting, and then post-pandemic or mid-pandemic, people wanted to complete their lives at home. Is that more prominent now?
There was a huge shift, and I lived through it as somebody who worked through the pandemic. There was a lot of fears of being alone in the hospital because there was a lot of restrictions for visitations and things like that. So even when we felt that the families were struggling or the patient wanted to come in, the sheer fact that they are going to die alone changed that. So there was a big push, both from healthcare and personally, to help those families create that environment in their home where they could die peacefully, which is ultimately what you want, right?
How does a girl like you end up helping people complete their lives? How did you get drawn into it? You've been a registered nurse for 10 years, and 5 of those has been committed to palliative care. How did that happen?
It was an accident.
Like, did you get the short straw or something? Is that?
You know, when you graduate as a nurse, when
Yes.
I did graduate as a nurse, that's not the first job that most students want.
Do you think,
Yeah, because it's going backwards. Majority of nurses want to start off in med surg, where they get to learn all the different skills and, take care of a patient in an acute setting. Palliative care is completely different, and I think it was where I became the best nurse, actually.
Really? So how did you get there? Like, did somebody say, "Here, we've got this spot for you," or you needed a job, or what? How did that happen?
I did my training there, and
okay.
Yeah. So I sort of landed a job there, and there's a saying, ignorance is bliss. I didn't know much about it other than I got a job, and I'm going to do the best I can.
Right.
And I went with it, and I learned a lot. I changed as a person, actually, since that job.
How did it change you?
Initially, I use the example of a soldier that goes to war, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when they go to war and they see the horrible things that they see and they come back home, they can't expect their families to understand what they went through. So for me, when I went to work, it was a type of war for me. It was seeing people die and wrapping bodies and seeing families in misery, young children laying over their mother that's no longer alive. So it was hard for me.
Do you think? What an amazing sacrifice, commitment. Thank you so much.
So it was hard for me to connect with regular people.
Yes. You mean those that aren't dealing with people that are in acute care or completing their lives? Right. Well, who would understand that?
So that's how I dealt with it. They can't understand it because they did not go through it.
That's right.
So over the years, I've come to realize that everyone is capable of doing that to their loved ones. It's just they're not put in positions where they have to do it.
As in helping them complete their life.
Right.
I see.
So I believe everyone is capable of doing
that. As a support emotionally.
Yes.
Which would then make it easier for the support workers to be more detached technically. Is that or just with the details of the work or the job?
I think it will help with the healing for both the person that's dying and the person that's going to grieve after as well.
What was it like the first time you experienced somebody completing their life?
I was scared.
When you were watching it, what was it like when it happened?
It didn't feel real, right? I didn't want to believe it.
Okay.
And also, I didn't clinically understand when that person actually died, because they look like they're sleeping, right?
So, just right afterwards, you mean?
Right. So I didn't have the clinical knowledge to know this is when they died, right? What are the things we're looking for?
I see. Okay.
Right. And you're just in shock, right? You're
first, yeah.
But I had a great team that were senior nurses than me.
So did you become just detached after a while? Just another day at work?
No.
Never
I
once.
actually think it went the other way, actually, where I took it upon myself to prepare the patient and the family and be in a position. You're in a position of power, aren't you? Right?
I guess.
So, I know that comes with great responsibility, and you want to make sure that the information that you're giving, it empowers the family and not puts them in a position of vulnerability, right?
So how do people easily accept the fact that their life is coming to an end? Do most people say, "Oh, well, that's just the way it is," or do they kick and fight and yell and scream? What do they do?
Of course, everyone's different. I would say majority. I worked with a lot of cancer patients, so oncology was my expertise. And by the time they get to the phase of palliative care, or palliative care is introduced to them, it's kind of like that wounded soldier aspect in terms of their therapies they've been through. So they've come to a point where they're tired. They don't want to do it anymore. And they may be still fighting because they want to live longer for their loved ones. But there's an element of exhaustion there. So a lot of our work, actually, and me and my colleagues, we talked about that. We spend a lot more time with families than the patient. And it's
really?
Oh yeah, big time.
What do you do with the families?
Well,
this is fascinating. Thank you so much for doing this.
So, and the reason being, I think, is because when the patient's going through the treatment trajectory or the initial diagnosis, there's that fighting part. You're fighting the cancer, you're in a world of treatments and going through the cycles, and you don't want to, no one is interested in talking about the end, because that's not the headspace you're in. So when you're now presented with a terminal illness and your oncologist is running out of ammunitions, which are your therapies for you, then the reality of your cancer, which is now not curable anymore, comes to the surface. And at that point, I find that's when the families and everybody gets involved, because the patient is no longer getting treatment and going about their lives. There's actually a timeline that's given to you.
So approximately 3 weeks more, or a month, or a day, or?
A lot of the oncologists use scans, PET scans, and results and things like that to give you, and they never give you exact number, but a range of time. So the reality of your mortality comes to the surface, that I am going to die very soon, becomes a reality. You're no longer fighting this cancer. You're living with it.
So what is the general acceptance then? What happens when someone? What happens if somebody says, "No, I'm not going to die. I'm going to fight," and then they hate you because you're looking after them? Has that ever happened?
Oh yeah. especially the young ones.
Especially young ones, yes. And young ones with their families, will they be more those ones that are not going to give up? They would be more hostile than ones that were more accepting?
Absolutely.
Have people been abusive and say, you did it, you caused this death? Have you experienced that?
The oncologists really get the brunt of that.
Yes.
Because
Okay.
they are the driver of the ship, right?
Right.
It's like someone who lost the war. That's how they see it. They lost it.
Do they really? They really go through that? Even they still do with it. Just about everyone.
It's honestly, I think, one of the hardest jobs to do.
Well, it is what the one that you did, or just to be in that field. It is.
I think anybody in oncology has a hard time, but I find that the oncologist is the one that's supposed to give you that hope, give you that option. This is what I'm going to do for you.
Sure.
And to come around and tell you I don't have anything for you because of X, Y, and Z it's like someone saying I'm defeated. I can't. Right. So they really do take it personally. Yeah.
So what's generally the patient's response when the doctor says there's nothing more we can do for you but keep you comfortable? How do people respond to that?
I think depending on how the oncologist prepared them throughout the journey.
Okay.
Because especially if the treatment was curative in nature, then you are in a position where you're giving them the best of the best, and you're shooting them with the strongest therapy that's available, because your outlook is cure in nature. And when that no longer becomes curative, then it's a losing battle for both parties involved.
What benefit did you experience giving that kind of service to people kind? How did it make you a stronger, a greater, a more evolved being? How did that happen? What did it do to you? Or did it?
Oh, of course.
Share that part.
I think it really, when we all say it, it really makes us value the simple things in life. You know, when we see a very sick patient get up and take a shower on their own, that's a win for that patient, you know. So we really do appreciate the simple things in life. And we actually talk a lot more about retirement than any other groups.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, we see so many people that retire and then within a year or two, they're diagnosed. And it's like your whole life, you talk about your retirement, only for you to now be running to the hospitals for appointments. And stuff. So we really do talk a lot about quality of life and balance and stuff, because we see it day in and day out.
How do you determine that, the quality of life? I had a friend in the last couple of years when you helped me with this friend who got sick with cancer, and this friend was not willing to give up the ship, and right to the very end put up, and the whole family did too. How do you handle somebody like that just will refuse to let go in spite of the fact that they're quickly slipping away? How do you handle that?
I cheer them on.
Do you?
Because that's what keeps them going.
I see.
Right. So as a nurse, you have to be a chameleon, because you have to read the room. If that is what she wants and that is what she desires, then you have to support them as long as you're not abusing your power. So for example, that's where the oncologists struggle, because they have the power to now give a treatment. But if that treatment is going to cause more harm than good, then there's the abuse of power, right? As nurses, we have the ability to just work on the sidelines of their symptoms, their day-to-day. So for her, knowing that she's alive and she's going to keep fighting every single day is what drove her. So if I were to break that, it's not going to do any good to her other than remind her again.
Crush her and make her bummed out at the end of her life. So, and then how do you deal with somebody that says, okay, I'm on that conveyor belt. I'm eventually going to be in the sawmill. How do you deal with that person that says, okay, this is the way it's going to be? How do you deal with them?
We call them the easy case.
Oh, okay. Right. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Like, welcome to our side of the, we can dig into it deeper. I find we can do legacy work on them. We can prepare. We can really get into more than just their treatment and their trajectory, their families. What about your situation in your home? How are you going to organize your life so that your family just basically has to call your lawyer and everything is done, right?
So besides being a physical, hands-on, do the work, like give them the needles and put the needles in the lines and change the bedpans and all that kind of stuff, you're also responsible for their emotional state of mind as well?
Yeah, it's an interdisciplinary team, so many people are involved in that care. A nurse, a doctor, social worker, everybody's involved.
But you're on the front line.
Yes, we have the luxury. We have the luxury of spending a lot of time with our patients. So that is where most of our work comes from. Yeah. So we really get to know them, their families and what's happening to them. So we are sort of the informer for the rest of the team because we have the luxury of having 2 or 3 patients a day and spending that time with them.
So when one of the easy ones come to the awareness, okay, the inevitable life process, I'm going to, go out like a man, or I'm going to go out like maturely or in a spiritual way. What type of things are they interested in as they're completing their life? What do they think about? Do they think about they could have done better at work, or they could have been more successful in their hobby? What kind of things do most people seem to talk about?
At the end of it all, I realize, even the miserable ones, ultimately it surrounds love.
Really? So, yeah. As in they gave too much or didn't get enough, or
they just want to be around love. If that means being around their children, being around a child that was estranged, let's say, or the regrets that all resurfaces. So in the context of love is what I see mostly. That sort of stays at the end, even till the end. I find that is what holds on, more than money and everything else that they are dealing with. Yeah.
Have you ever seen a situation where a parent disowned a child at the completion of their life?
So that's interesting you say that, Robert. I think people grieve differently.
Okay.
And we had a situation where there was a young man, and the mother, agreeably so, was miserable and did not want to see her young child die before her. And she gave everybody a hard time appropriately. She wanted everything done, but the reality was he was not doing well. And so we were all nervous and dreading the day that he will die, because we knew that day was coming. And when we called her, and it was in the middle of the night, we try to call before they die, just so that they could be around them. And there's certain indicators we have. And she never came. So there's 2 ways you can look at it. So the one way is she didn't want to come, or the other one is she didn't want to remember him that way. So I took the latter. So.
How do you look after yourself? I happen to know that in the last year, there was a loss in your families. I'm going to dedicate this episode to your father-in-law, by the way. at the end, we'll post a dedication to him. Is it easier for you as someone who works in that field to experience the loss of a loved one? Because you were very committed to him. You were remarkably loyal. Is it easier for you to go through that process because of the job you do, or are you just like us mere mortals?
I think initially it was easier when I was the nurse.
Okay.
But
because they don't mean anything to you, like like they don't touch your soul, right? Right.
You're able to clinically look at the issue, understand what's happening, and you're giving the reality check on that. The minute I removed that layer, and I was the daughter-in-law, it opened up other cans of worms that I held on. So it was actually very painful, Robert.
Yes, I do recall.
But I'm using that to help others for sure. I think it humanizes the experience now for me. Like I don't mind crying on the phone. So with the patients, right?
So as well, thank you for sharing that. That's very, very brave of you. It's very touching. It is just sort of, it kind of caught me off guard a bit. So what would you say to people as they're facing the loss of their a family member? What advice would you give them? The ones that are left behind here.
I would say the greatest service you can do to somebody is advocate for them. Because it's a lot. It's a lot to handle when you're sick and you're not remembering anything. You're asked to take care of yourself and to deal with appointments and doctors. And so I say, if you can't deal with what's going on, the least you could do is be there to support them, arrange their appointments, take them to their appointments, get them the psychosocial support that they need, sit down, have a tea with them, normalize the fact that this is part of their life. And interestingly enough, when you do that, all that time you're thinking you're doing that for them, but the entire time you're doing it for yourself.
You are doing it for yourself so that you wouldn't have as much work, or that it would be easier for you to deal with the person's completion, or both.
So I believe that, especially with the cancer diagnosis, the grieving starts upon diagnosis.
Okay.
There's a lot of misconception that it happens after they die. And I believe that it happens upon the information that's relayed to you. So, of course, the true grieving happens once the patient dies. But what you do from the time that you are involved in that person's life till the end of their life is going to make a profound difference to the rest of your grieving process, I believe.
I am deeply touched by how and what you shared with us, and so thankful. Thank you for your commitment and your service, and thank you for sharing it with us.
Thank you, Robert.
Well, this brings us to the end of another fascinating, sensitive, feeling, and enlightened episode of My Side of the Crystal Ball. I'd like to thank my guest tonight, Nurse Sharmini Varunan, palliative care expert specialist. Thank you for sharing your knowledge, your information, and thank you for your service. I'd also like to thank Tinka Bel Boczek in Australia. Thank you for sharing your personal life, your stories, your developing psychic ability. Just thank you for being Tinka Bel. Just before I go, I have a request. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. You can find us on Apple, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere else you find and listen to your podcast. If you're looking to find me personally, you can find me on my website, www.robertlindsymilne.com. You can also find me on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok. Well, that brings us to the end. I'd like to say thank you again. And before I go, just remember, do good, stay safe, and above all, just be kind. Good night, everybody.